That's that. Got the questions up. Is this on? Oh, yeah, cool. That looks like it's recording. Live to no one. Kia ora, g'day, welcome back. Just working out where to look. So looking at this camera here. Here with some follow-up questions in the reintegration space again. A slightly different perspective. I've still got 3 questions to do from the first lot of questions that have come through. So I'll see how we go and try and get to those this morning. What are we? It's about 10 o'clock, nearly 10 o'clock. Anyway, let's have a look. I doubt there'll be anybody on the live at this time. Apologies to those that have, again, reached out and asked if I have got a regular schedule of when I'll be doing these lives. And then some have said, I'd be good if you could just do them in the evening. We'll see how we go. I'm really just doing these lives and content because it fits my schedule at the time and it's convenient for me, and I enjoy it. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy doing it or wouldn't enjoy doing it at another time where there possibly might be some people watching, but yeah, it is what it is. People can either watch it or not watch it. Anyway, I'm going to jump into this recent question that I've got first before finishing off these other 3 from the initial 11 that I received. So received 11 questions from a current serving corrections officer who's looking to get into the reintegration space, particularly in the youth side of things. As I've touched on, that's just a bit of context for anybody that might pop up here that may be wondering, why am I talking about reintegration? And that's on the basis of some of the opportunities over time and the privilege that I've had to work in that space, managing a service over in the Nainai area down here in Wellington. Anyway, this is the latest question or comment message with a question, or questions actually that have come through, but they've said question. They've got, hey Joe, I've been enjoying listening to and watching your videos on reintegration. Thank you. Thanks for that. Having had several family members end up inside multiple times and providing a place for them to come back to as part of their parole conditions. Okay, yep. Only to have them go back to doing the same stupid SHIT they were doing before. It becomes so draining because you put so much effort into trying to help them, only to have that spat back in your face. Yeah, I can, I can relate to a degree in terms of some of my experience in that space of what this person is talking about. Can't imagine how much different it must hit and feel when it is, a family member, a close family member. You've got here, I know the questions you received on this topic so far have come from a prison officer who mentioned they're looking at getting into the youth space, but my question comes from a personal home-based perspective. I heard you say that when you chose to work in that area, you knew you had to be willing to give people a second chance, and your expectation was that your team needed to be willing to do the same. Yeah, I did. So you must have caught the either the live or watched it back, because it was one of the questions from yesterday. Or sorry, it wasn't one of the questions. It was one of the things that I tried to give context on yesterday. I have a question regarding applications from prisoners to your service. Did you accept applications from prisoners if one of their previous crimes directly affected any of your staff? Wow. And would you accept, so I have a question, then seems like there's 2 questions. And after that first one, and would you accept an application from someone who might have impacted you or your family? Question mark. Wow. Interested in hearing your thoughts. Thanks for taking the time to respond to our questions. With warm regards, and they sign off. Man, some more good questions. I thought these first 11, well, not that I've got through the 11 yet, I've only responded to 8 in the couple of lives that I've done on them so far, were awesome questions, and they are. These ones are also to me, they're right up there as well. So thank you for taking the time to have a listen and or a watch to, or maybe just a listen to some of the stuff that I've been talking about based on the questions that have been posed to me, specific to the reintegration space. And thank you for, yeah, these two questions that you've asked. So I'll just go back over the first one again. Did you accept applications from prisoners if one of their previous crimes directly affected any of your staff? That's the first one. And would you accept an application from someone who might have impacted you or your family? Man, cool questions, eh? There's a lot of stuff running through my head right now, and there's one specific example in particular that comes to mind that in in relation to our service, and then uh, from my perspective, I'll look to answer that and try to combine the two. So, first part, we never received, fortunately, at our service anyway. Short answer, we never received any applications from um, at that time who were current prisoners or members behind the wire, individuals behind the wire, whatever you want to call it, or them. We never received any applications from people there uh, who had, to the best of our knowledge, had impacted or affected any of our staff, or me for that matter. However, what we did have is one of our team members, an awesome guy. He's moved over with his family to Australia now, but he was actually working here, working here in NZ. He used to be a corrections officer for many years before he decided to leave that space and come into reintegration. So maybe similar to the first lot of questions that I've received from another corrections officer who's looking at that reintegration space, but they've been looking more specifically at youth type stuff. This person, really, really lovely man in terms of just his approach, very talented, musical and that as well, and very family orientated. Anyway, he came to us. He was interviewed and had received the job as one of our navigators before I actually started the job as a service manager, and before I think before I had even been interviewed for the service manager role. Anyway, um, I did end up starting before him though, because of, I guess, the nature of the need to get um, some staff and structure and some, hopefully some management and leadership in there sooner rather than later. So I started about a week before him, even though he had been interviewed before me. And I think some of that was just due to his notice that he needed to give where he was and get things sorted out before coming on board. Anyway, he worked as a corrections officer. Sadly, tragically, uh, his well, one of his family members, close family member, well, his one of his siblings was killed by a person here in NZ. I don't know the details of it. I never asked. Didn't want to dredge up, you know, painful memories for the bro who was working as one of our valued team members. Um, but his brother was murdered, killed, and he worked as a corrections officer. Obviously, devastating news for him. I don't know if that was part of the reason why he left that space. He shared some stuff with me, which I won't go into here in any sort of detail, just in terms of where his head was at. On the back end of the conversation that I'd had with the team, and specific actually to what I identified in myself, that I needed to be willing to give people a second chance, and in order for this to work, otherwise me stepping into that role was a waste of time. That's what I felt anyway. And if I knew that I needed to be willing to do that, then I also felt that any staff that we had coming in needed to be willing to do the same. Essentially, give these people a second chance if they, if we go through this process, if they go through everything that we expect and they demonstrate that, um, and they get released by the parole board, then we needed to be willing to step up and support like what we said we would do, which was the intent and purpose of our of the service in the first place. So, although we never had any applications to my knowledge of people that had directly impacted, there was the potential for that. Our staff member came and spoke with me openly, one to one. Door was open. He came in and just said, "Hey, can I chat with you?" I said, "Yeah." Um, he goes, "Is it all right if I close the door?" I said, "Yeah, of course." So that was an actual closed door conversation. Otherwise, most of the conversations that I had with staff members and men in the service, the door just remained open. Um, anyway, closed the door, and then he went on and let me know what had happened. And he said, like in his role as a navigator, as I touched on some of the other Q and A's, was that navigators had a high touch with the people that were being assessed to come into the service. As I spoke about that lengthy onboarding process, which we allowed 6 weeks, but we would typically could get it done in 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes sooner, depending on how much access we had to the individual. But it was pretty. We got pretty good at and pretty efficient, or I should say, the navigators got pretty efficient at doing that sort of stuff and maintaining their workload and getting through everything and recording it all. He then let me know what had happened, and he said, "Listen, if the guy, so he knew who the person was, um, if the person who killed my brother applied to come here, he let me know. He goes, I wouldn't be able to work here um, for obvious reasons. He goes, I wouldn't be able to stay here. That, and he didn't want to bring that up in the team meeting that we had. So I'd always let them know, like if there's anything, anybody has any thoughts or change of opinion later, if they don't want to bring it up here, even though I encourage people to bring it up there, like just come see me later. So he came saw me after the meeting. Said I wouldn't be able to work here. So this is that one just hit me. Your first part of the question really comes to mind straight away from your personal home based perspective you've got here. We didn't receive applications, but we um, anticipated that we potentially could, even more so after this team member came and spoke with me about what had tragically happened to his brother. So as far as he was aware, our staff member, the person that had done that to his brother, was in a prison up in Auckland, in one of the Auckland prisons here in NZ. And as I mentioned, we receive referrals from all over the country, North and South Island, across all, I think it's 18 prisons. Well, I think it's 18 prisons across NZ. So yeah, some you get more applications from certain prisons than others, but essentially, yeah, there's a lot of applications coming in, and so there was, and we had received a number of applications from Auckland, a combination of life sentences, murderers, manslaughter, and everything in between, and it made a lot of sense to me. I acknowledged where it was coming from. So what did we do in that instance? Obviously, like I said, we didn't receive any applications that I'm aware of. The staff member had this tragic situation happen to his brother. He was open and honest about the fact that he wouldn't be able to stay here, like if we were to accept an application from the individual that had done this to his family member, in this case to his brother. And so part of I looked at that as part of my role as needing to look after and protect, obviously, our staff, as well as the men that come in, as well as the community, as well as I could, and as practically as I could. So when he said that, my first few words out of my mouth to him in response was, "Yeah, we won't let that happen," um, meaning that I would um, choose our staff member to stay rather than accept an application from an individual that has, had a massive direct impact on our staff member. Right or wrong, that was the immediate decision that I made there and then in the office, one to one with our team member. And then from there, I went on and made that clear to the rest of our team. And then I also let my general manager know. We mentioned Thomas, an awesome fella, and let him know, hey, this is what's popped up. This is what we've had the discussion on. Obviously, because this is what I felt personally in terms of needing to be open to giving people a second chance. Blah blah blah, and that our team needed to be. Our team was on board. One of the team members came and saw me. This is the situation. I've told him straight away, yeah, that won't happen. Like we're not going to accept an application from anybody that has had a direct negative impact onto any of our staff. Um, and he was cool with it. My general manager, my boss was cool with it. The team members were happy with that, and I'd say my general manager Thomas was happy with that as well. So we needed to clear the air and just sort of put some put some measures in place to protect the staff, like I mentioned. So that's in response to that. Did you accept? No, we didn't accept, but that's because, excuse me, during my time, as far as I'm aware, we didn't receive any applications that we knew of that directly impacted any of our staff. So that extended to not only direct impact but also indirect impact. So we learnt from that. I learnt from that. We learnt from that together, and we started hashing out other, you know, uh, what ifs within reason. Not trying to go too far fetched, but just other what if scenarios within reason that we felt could potentially happen. And the other part to that came up, which I think lines up with your questions, is that we would likely not accept any applications from inmates at the time who had either directly impacted or indirectly impacted any of our staff. So maybe an application from a person, some of the crimes or previous crimes that they committed didn't actually directly affect myself or any of the team, but it may have indirectly because it was a sibling who's living with their family or another family relative, a cousin or something, or a close friend. Somebody that you spent and spend a lot of time with and needed to potentially help through whatever that situation may have been, if it was somebody else's previous offending. So um, that was part of that. And then, sort of measures to try to capture that. It wasn't uncommon for us to, when an application would come, at the point whereby applications were um, not right nearing the end, but starting to progress. Once a person had gone through the initial interview with me, and I was making a decision to progress them onto the navigator, um, or one of the navigators, then our weekly meetings that we'd have that list of where people were at, applicants, and what stage, where they were anticipated to go. Part of those staff meetings was also checking in on staff and making sure, hey, does anybody recognize any of the names? Not only for potential negative impacts or crimes that may have impacted them directly or indirectly, but also just potential conflict of interest. Like, wasn't uncommon, and we did have some staff who recognized names who were family members of theirs. So potential conflict of interest. Did we turn those ones away? Not in that setting. We needed team members to declare that, fill out the relevant paperwork, and just disclose that, oh yeah, I do know this person. This is one of my cousins or whatever. Which we had some of those, and it just it's it wasn't uncommon. That aspect wasn't uncommon. But to your question specifically, applications from prisoners who had committed or their previous crimes had affected directly any of our staff, we didn't receive any of those. But we did have some staff members that knew some of the names that came. Not all of the names ended up at the service because some of them were just, you know, bloody rat bags and didn't hold up their end of the bargain. So they ended up being declined and told, yeah, nah, you can either reapply in 3 months or 6 months, but you haven't kept up your side of the agreement, so you're not progressing any further. And then by and large, a lot of those ones, I guess they just got peed off and then just applied somewhere else, went somewhere else. But we did have some, literally a handful. I can still remember now. I could count on one hand the number of men that did actually go through the whole process and make it there, who just happened to be a cousin of one of the staff members. So as long as that stuff was disclosed, um, and everybody knew, and everybody was also happy. So those were things that were raised in that final assessment as well, and that iwi panel as well. So everybody knew, corrections knew, the iwi knew, all staff knew, the other men knew. There was no um, secrets in that regard in terms of who knew who. So people weren't getting any extra special, um, what was it, special privileges. It's one of those things that we wanted to make sure of wasn't happening. So hopefully that helps answer that. We wouldn't, and we had decided that we wouldn't be considering or progressing any applications that came through. Again, that would, for us, we would have needed to, or I would have needed to let the case manager know as well, and if need be, have the meeting with the individual, with the tane as well, with the male, and just be open with them, not giving the staff members' names or details or which offence it was or anything like that, but just saying, hey, unfortunately, this is this is the situation, and because of that, we can't and won't be progressing your application. But I never had to do that. But that was in the plan. In your second part of the question, and would I accept an application from someone who might have impacted me or my family? The short answer is no. Um, if somebody had directly impacted my family or me or those that are close to me, like indirectly, a close indirect association, and I knew about it and I knew the person's name, uh, the process would have been the same. I would have disclosed that and I would have spoken with the case manager if I recognize the name. So, when the application comes in, if I recognize the name right off the bat, like I wouldn't even bother speaking with that individual because you know, I might get too upset in that process. So the course of action for me would have been to go back to where we received the referrals from. Actually, that's the term for it, referrals from the SPO, which was a single point of entry, is what that acronym stood for. Single point of entry is where we would receive the applications, or sorry, the referrals from. And if I was to your second part of the question, if I was to recognize a name, um, of somebody that may have done something to me, uh, affected me, or indirectly affected me through their offending to somebody else that I knew well, then yeah, no, I wouldn't have accepted the application or the referral. So you've got, yeah, interested in hearing your thoughts. Thanks for taking the time to respond to your questions. You're welcome. With warm regards. So that's my take. That's my response to your question. Thanks again for taking time to share your perspective. Yeah, I can empathize with you in regards to and relate in regards to the frustrations and the drain that it can be. Because although I've spouted about this in-depth process that we had at the whare, the standards being high, etc., uh, people still get through. And I think that's the same in any organization or any service. Try as you might, try as we might, to put really good systems and processes in place to whether that's in recruitment or whether that's in recruitment selection, probably the same thing, whatever you want to call it, whether that's in you know business and onboarding customers or making things easier for the user experience and all that sort of stuff. There's likely still issues or gaps or challenges or complaints that may happen. So yeah, the parts that I was getting at to your initial comments in your message was that, yeah, even though we had all of that in place, we still, got burnt several times while I was there as well, whereby people just you've got here, only to have them go back to doing the same stupid shit they were doing before. Yeah, and unfortunately, some of those habits can be really hard to break for those individuals, and or they just flat out lie and say one thing, and they're just completely doing another behind everybody else's back. But they've managed to convince us well enough in the process that they're legitimate and that they're going to look to make change, but they end up not making change. So yeah, it's very draining. You haven't used that word here, but oh yes, you have. It becomes so draining because you put so much effort. I think definitely draining. You put so much effort in, but you also have, or I had, and I know that the team had at that time, we had a lot of hope for the individual too. And so when those things are sort of flattened and taken away effectively, it's yeah, it's just like, oh man, so much work and effort and energy and time went into um, trying to help this person, and they have, like you've said here, just spat it back in your face or just given us a kick in the nuts. Um, and it seems can feel like all that effort and time was for nothing. So anyway, that's that one. Let's come back to see if I get through these other three questions. How are we going for time? Yeah, it's only about 24 minutes. Oh, what have we got here? TX2, are you back again? I've just let my dogs out. It's holy heck, that's late, bro. It's just after 11 p.m. here in GB, and Joe popped up. Thanks for stopping by, bro. I'm sure you're going to be getting to bed soon, so you can get up and be as active as you are with all the other stuff that you do. I've watched all your reaction videos. Really? Nah, thanks, bro. Oh, that's pretty crazy. I think there's like several hundred videos on my channel. Maybe you just skip watch them. Either way, whatever you've done, even if you haven't watched all of them, if you've just spent some time on the channel, thank you, bro. Yeah, appreciate it. Where are we? Let's go to number 9. So back to the questions from the corrections officer. Number 9, how do you teach ownership to someone who has spent their entire life blaming their circumstances? Wow. Um, yeah, spoken a bit about some of the blaming stuff and pointing fingers everywhere else except at themselves. I think, how do you teach it? I think over what we tried to do was we knew that acknowledging that it would take time. So taking some time, uh, good conversations, positive, respectful conversations with the individual, reminders with them, and example as best we can. Trying to set the example, all of us, not just from the expectation, not just from myself as the service manager, not just the expectation from myself to my general manager. So I needed him to lead and set a good example as well, which he did, but I also needed our team to set a good example and taking ownership. So when each of us stuffed up at different times, and we did, whether that's through not speaking up, whether that's through uh, not doing something in our day-to-day work or job, um, especially when instructions had been provided as well, and there were plenty of times of that. So when those things happened, uh, we all needed to step up, um, not only in front of the staff, but also in front of the men that we had in the service. And we found that by doing that, by being able to do that, explain that, demonstrate that, and show that it was okay to stuff up, to show these men, and also to show the staff, because it's not nice, it's not comfortable to put up your hand and say I stuffed up. The video that I did yesterday talking about the when I exited one of the men, that wasn't comfortable or nice. Didn't feel good. Like I didn't feel good um, owning that whole situation in terms of the mistake that I made, or mistakes plural that I made during that whole situation, and that rested with me as a service manager. So I ultimately held the responsibility to make the final decision. I did make the final decision. I was also aware of the other stuff that led up to what could have potentially caused the individual that was in our service at the time to go a bit off the rails like he did. But he didn't hurt anyone. But I escalated it in terms of, he could have had the potential to hurt somebody else or himself, just through the mistake that I made of exiting him whilst he was in crisis. He had breached the rules, yes, but he needed it. What he needed at that time was a safe place to rest and sleep. And at the home that he had access to, whereby we had staff and security cameras and that around, and yet there are other men in the whare, but they've got their own space and their own room in that as well. So a flatting situation, 3-man room. Um, it still would have been safer for him, unless he bloody went off the rails and decided to start attacking the other men in there. Then a whole bunch of what ifs. But at the end of the day, I had stuffed up with regards to that. So where was I going? It's never comfortable, and it's never a good feeling when you know that you've stuffed up and you've got to wear it. So in this case, here to your question, how do you teach that ownership? Yeah, that example is a big one. Being willing to own and accept and take responsibility for those mistakes, allowing time, because a number of the men that we had were so used to blaming whatever else they could and whoever else they could, that you don't, and it's very difficult to just um, switch that off overnight, or even over a 2, 3 week or 6 week period, in terms of how long our assessment process was. So all through that process, like right from the first, or even right from the application that they're filling out, we're looking to see who are they going to blame for their offending history and that sort of stuff. And you see that play out in their handwriting, or sometimes they're not happy with their handwriting, so a case manager will type it out for them. Their response is word for word, and you see it and read it in some of their commentary. So you have a bit of a heads up before you go into your first meeting if they make it that far. plus a whole bunch of other stuff. And then you hear it and you see it either online or in person. Again, when you're going over some of those questions and you're trying to get a feel for, some of the common patterns in their offending history, as an example, which I've touched on in other videos. And then you're trying to, get a gauge for uh, what they see as the cause, who they see as the person or persons to blame for why they did what they did, and or even down to how or why they got caught, who they blame. Um, and it's you start to see some common patterns of finger pointing elsewhere except at themselves. Not in all cases, but in the vast majority, at least in my experience anyway. And so that obviously takes time, and then needing to try to, as respectfully as you can. Sometimes you're more um, sometimes you're more blunt and direct, because a number of the referrals and people that we're referring were very used to just very direct, um, dare I say, colorful language in their communication. Uh, Using less words was better in a number of cases, and just cutting straight to the chase was better in a number of cases. So there were some referrals or applicants that you could have that type of conversation with. Others, you needed to not skirt around it, but you needed to try to find a way to bring to their attention that, hey, it's actually not anybody else to blame. Have you looked in the mirror lately? have you have you considered that maybe you were just being an idiot or an egg at that time, and that's why you are where you are? Have you considered that all these other 15, 20 pages of yours, of your offending history, that these are actually because of you again? Like, these victims and the people that you cause these offenses against didn't invite you into their lives and say, please come here and do this to me. So when having those conversations and then trying to steer things around, and guide them, and everyone's different, like each conversation I found with the individuals is different, because they've got different barriers, different mindset, and how they view the world and how they view those different circumstances that they're in. So trying to find a way to link back to that and help them understand that we're not here um, to support their excuses. We're here to support them and taking ownership and being accountable. So yeah, that's part of what we did, or that's pretty much what we did as we went through. And then from there, once they get into the service, just because they've made it to the service doesn't mean that all their blaming is gone, because it hasn't. It's just a case of us being aware, keeping the ears open and listening, body language, etc., and having regular catch ups. So that was the navigator's job. Hence why the navigators had such high touch connection with the men in our service. They, like I've shared in other videos, they essentially became their case manager at the whare. And as a result, the case managers or navigators in our case have got a allocation of uh, people, which is their workload, and they've got to stay on top of all of that stuff for each individual and have their reports done and update the system and track how they're progressing, etc. They typically would be the first person that the men in our service would call, just because they've spent so much more time with them. But they also knew that they could call any of the staff, and in fact, they could call myself or the assistant service manager as well, even though we may not have had as much, or may not have as much daily interaction with them as usual, because or as the navigator, because there's a whole bunch of other stuff, ongoing referrals, etc., and looking ahead from the not only the or looking ahead from the strategic perspective, while the 2IC was a massive help in running the day-to-day operations of the service. So yeah, that's question 9. How's that? Oh, it's only half an hour, surprisingly. What's this? There's a book, Heist: South Africa's Cash and Transit Epidemic Uncovered, where the author speak with the perpetrators. Well, that must be insightful. Many said money and lifestyle was the main motivator over socio-economic factors. Yeah, I bet. I bet. It's interesting that you say that, because a lot of the um, a lot of the people that I'm, without naming their names, but in this reintegration space, yeah, by and large, it was about money and trying to get ahead. It was about, in some cases, about trying to pay bills, put food on the table. In some cases, it was just about, sadly, or not, I shouldn't say just about, in some cases, it was about trying to prove themselves to, in their gang space, things that they needed to show their commitment. In some cases, it was people taking the fall for senior members within an organization. Um, and oh man, there's so many. Geez, I could go on actually. Now that, now that I read that, there's a bunch of things. In some cases, it was survival, like in the prison setting. Uh, in the prisons, surprisingly, at least here in NZ, is a massive recruiting ground for new gang members. Um, Especially when you got a lot of first time people in there that aren't affiliated. There's a fear that happens for them, that if they don't align themselves or affiliate themselves with a group or with a gang, that they'll be at risk. So survival comes into play. But yeah, to your point here in this book, that sounds like an interesting one. Uh, Maybe they should make a movie about it if they haven't already. Money and just trying to get ahead is a big part of it, which is sad. Obviously, yeah, there's people that become addicted to substances, so stealing and robbing and committing crimes for money for the purposes of trying to get substances to put into their system and body so that they can try to avoid whatever other stuff they're going through is also part of it. So yeah, lots of stuff going on for um, individuals all around the place. So thanks for sharing that, Stuart. What's this one? 10. How do you handle the frustration of watching someone you've invested in slide back into old destructive habits? As well, as I read this now, it sort of lines up with some of the other stuff that I've already spoken about. How do you deal with it, or how do you handle the frustration? Um, yeah, it's disappointing. How did we handle the frustration? For me personally, and us as a team, we just moved on to the next referral and application. As blunt or as harsh as that might sound, I think it ties in with one of the other questions about protecting, what was it, mental boundaries or maintaining mental boundaries. Like, there's no point in dwelling on that individual. Yeah, it's sad. Yeah, like I mentioned, there's been a heck of a lot of time, and there has been hours, days have gone into, trying to or go through the steps and processes to get the person assessed to get to the service in the first place, and then ongoing support to try to help them achieve their goals, short, medium, long term, so that they can progress. It's frustrating and it's disappointing when when all that time and effort has been invested and then they just go back to their old ways. Like, all we can do is do a bit of a review and assess where we went wrong. So that is something that we did. And we found some interesting things actually. So the younger ones, like the 18, 19 to sort of 24-year-olds, we found um, that they were more prone to just reoffending not long after they got out, as opposed to older people. Well, when I say older, like some of the late 20s, nearly 30s, early 30s, and up, were less inclined to, in comparison to that younger demographic, were less inclined to, you know, do more stupid stuff if for those that had been through the assessment and that were deemed to be genuine. Not always 100% guaranteed, but that's what we identified. So the younger cohort, whether it's a combination of, and having spoken with some of them, they said, oh, well, I'm not as old as these fellas here. Like, I know how to use social media. I know how to use a smartphone. I know how the shops work and self-serve and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to, the long leggers where a lot of that stuff wasn't around when they went in. Um, and then, the younger fellas are probably just got less patience, more tutu, just mischief. And yeah, so we identified that. And so because of that, we tended to stay away. Speaking with corrections and letting the iwi know and saying, hey, listen, this is impacting our outcomes and it's having an effect on other men in the service, who are trying to do the right thing. Then you got these bloody little young toe jam rat bags that just want to do their own thing. Uh, there must be. Can you send us through referrals or applications from people that are 30 years and older, and or from those in their sort of later 20s who've got a decent track record when it comes to their time in prison? uh, and what we mean by decent track record, they've got good behavior, they're staying out of trouble, they're trying to actively participate in programs to help improve themselves and make them better, a whole raft of things. So case managers generally knew what we were talking about, and corrections. So yeah, we started looking at older people to because we were having there were less was it proved, is that the right word? There was evidence to show that there was we had less challenges, um, different types of challenges, but the ones of absconding and not coming back and being bloody mischief around the place, we had less of that sort of stuff with the older ones coming in, or at least having a chance to come in. So yeah, a bunch of different things that we identified during that process, but handling that frustration, yeah, doing the review, uh, seeing what we could do better, what we may have missed, where we can and could, because sometimes some of those people might get recalled and then next minute they're trying to reapply again. The nerve and the cheek of some of these fellas, eh? And that was met with a automatic nah. You can reapply in 12 months' time. Like, uh, and or sometimes it's just a flat out nah. Listen, you've had multiple chances. Looking at your resume, I guess, for want of a better term, which is their offending history, calling that their resume, you've had multiple chances. You've multiple times where you've been released, and some to other services. You've said and gave us the good news story about how we're different and this, that, and the other. Managed to convince us or trick us, and then you've gone and been a bloody toe jam and done the same thing you were doing before. So some of those was just a flat out nut. We're not considering you to come back here again. um, and then others were just told, yeah, no, you can reapply in 12 months' time or 18 months' time. Like, you had your chance. Like, we're looking for genuine people. In that instance, some of those then hung their head and gone, oh man, I think some of the reality sunk in about the opportunity that they missed out on. But hey, too bad, so sad in that instance. And similarly for us, some of that is too bad, so sad. Hence why I said then it's time to move on to the next one. Next referral, next application, next lot of assessment, um, and then look to bring, more people in or another person in. So yeah, that's how some of the frustration was handled. Individuals would have had their own other ways. Like I said, exercise and PT for me is another one of those ways of uh, letting out some frustration. Um, what'd you say? Watching someone you've invested in slide back into old destructive habits. Yeah, I mean, once they're out of our service, like nothing more we can do. So there's no much, not much point or um, requirement to go spending and or wasting more time and energy thinking about that individual, other than from the just the review and continuous improvement perspective of um, what went wrong. What are some of the things that we did wrong? What did we miss? What could we have done better, if anything? Did we keep up our end of the bargain in terms of the support and check-ins, and has the navigator got a record of the meetings that they were having with them, the things that they were discussing, etc., so that when corrections come and have a chat and or the iwi and they go, hey, why did Bob end up um, slipping back into their old ways? What were we doing? Was he attending his AOD counselling sessions? Was he attending his psych sessions with the external provider that would come in? Was there structure to their day? Was there routine? Were they working on the goals, the safety plan that they had, etc.? Like, there's a bit of a process to have a look into what we were doing, what we didn't do, when things like that happened, and then with the intent of trying to do better. Once we've gone through that and we've gone, okay, we've identified the things that we either needed to improve or we can't identify anything where we went wrong. We believe it may have been a case of this person just had really no intention of looking to try to make changes. They just used us as a vehicle to present to the parole board. They, potentially just told us what we wanted to hear in order to have our support at their parole board hearing, which we then gave. Then they got released, and then they just carried on reassociating with people that they weren't supposed to, and just picked up where they left off. So, which was sometimes some of the sad part of what happened. But once you've been through that, as I mentioned, then it's just time to move on. On to the next one, and we're up to question 11. Hang on, what's here? It's the ebook. Lewis. Sometimes, and I say this from a law enforcement perspective. Oh, awesome. Lewis B85. I value the relationship between community policing and social services. However, there has to be a point of stop. Yep. 100% is definitely clear. I agree with you. Definitely clear lines in terms of the nature of the work, especially from a law enforcement perspective, from your lens to the community perspective and social services. Definitely clear demarcation for that type of work. That was one of the things that I enjoyed actually. We went and met myself and the assistant service manager went and met with the local police in the area. They knew about our service, part of the safety things that were put in place in terms of they knew about our location, the number of homes, our capacity for numbers wise, that we were staffed 24/7, security cameras, etc. They never came by unless they were invited. So we would invite them. We also had conversations with them about, it'd be great if they were able to come along just in plain clothes, civilian clothes, in a non-police vehicle, as it can and was quite triggering for some people. Just that's their own issues as far as I was concerned. The not the police, but the men in our service. But as a way to try to, because part of what we would do is trying to show the men that were in our service that, hey, the police officers have got a job to do. They are human just like you and I. They have got families just like you and I, and they want to go home to their families just like you and I. They're trying to, and they've chosen a job, a profession, so that they can provide for their families. Your profession that you chose was joining a gang, or not always joining a gang, but doing stupid stuff. Um, you know, committing robberies, burglaries, or whatever to try to get ahead by negatively impacting others. These people have chosen a profession whereby they want to try to protect the community and others, and hold to account and capture those that would do harm to others. So trying to educate them around that and letting them know, I'm sure you would want the police to capture anybody that may have committed offences against you or your loved ones. So just trying to have those types of conversations with men that have been used to being in and out of the prison and have just a very overt disdain for um, law and order, for want of a better term, or those people that to them, I'm not going to use the three-lettered word that they would describe police officers as, but yeah, trying to bridge that gap uh, as best we could. And what that caused for us, in a positive way, was that uh, those police officers got to come into the service and get a feel for the homes, the staff, the men, how we're set up, sort of what can happen on a day to day. They also got to get a better understanding of, I guess if they were paying attention, but we would have provided it anyway. But if they were paying attention, the layout of the homes in our area and the locations of those and all that sort of stuff. Um, and that was in an effort, to work with them so that they could, should, touch wood, they don't have to, but should they ever have to come to the service in an emergency, that they would have a good idea of um, not only the staff that they would be coming, but the layout of the area because they'd been there. Plus, hopefully, they by then they might have a somewhat of a relationship, albeit relatively distant, potentially initially, with the men. If not all of the men, then some of the men that were there. That led to those local community police officers being seen, obviously, in the community where a lot of our men would be. Meant that they could just give a nod or a hello or a g'day or a kia ora or whatever to each other, and then just carry on about their day. Um, don't need to stop and have a chat, but just in a way, as best we could, trying to bridge some of those gaps. But there's definitely a point where all of that, that just stops. It's just clear cut. We're having none of that. And the obvious clear cut of some of that one incident that did happen, which I wasn't there for. Again, this happened late in the evening, but one of the men, sadly, which shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. Corrections decided to recall this individual, and my poor staff that were there, they the police came to the front door of the staff office, knocked on the door, and Blinken tooled up with their M4s. Police officers rocked up. We're like, holy heck, what's going on here? So we since after that had some conversations and stuff with corrections that wasn't, I think corrections issuing the recall for one of the life sentences that we had who had done nothing wrong. They recalled him. I say they shouldn't have, but they recalled him because they were just concerned with some of the stuff that he'd been talking about in his probation reports, which we were aware of, which we had actually made them aware of, and we were happy with it. We were comfortable. There was no threats of violence, or there was no bad behavior or anything like that. And it turned out, long story short, he ended up being released back into our service anyway after that. So, we felt like he had been recalled for absolutely no reason. We were aware of the things that he was struggling with. It was noted in his safety plan before he got to us. He made us aware of it, and we were working with him and checking with him regularly, and he was feeling more and more comfortable with it as it was going along. But uh, corrections at that time felt a need to execute a recall, which we didn't agree with. And again, the shoe was on the other foot. So this was after I'd made the stuff up of the other individual where I accepted responsibility for. This was now where the shoe was on the other foot, and we're highlighting to corrections the things that they did wrong, reminding them of the collaborative partnership which they wanted to have, which we've taken on board, and we've listed out the changes that we've done to be more flexible. And then in this case here, when we assumed that that would have been, two ways reciprocated back to us, they've just gone straight over the top of what we were doing. We had been keeping them informed the whole way, and they just recalled him. And the manner in which they recalled him was, really confronting, not only for our staff, but and for that individual who got recalled, but also for the other men that were there as well. Probably not a nice feeling having law enforcement rock up, tooled, tooled up, weapons openly displayed, hands on the pistol grip, finger outside the trigger guard, other hand on the towards the foregrip of the weapon. It's like for our staff, those images are in my head from how they described it because of the impact that it had on them, and so I can imagine that they had not experienced anything like that before, not our staff anyway, and some of the men hadn't. But there wasn't any need for that. Like if they were concerned and they needed to have the person recalled, which we had done, and I had been there on site for other ones, we were able to handle those in without all of that stuff, without any show of force or potential for the use of force, etc., and without the need for any handcuffs as well. So, working with the police and then us being able to be there to de-escalate the situation and then bring the person out. So, a few times where I had to be where I was actually there for some of that stuff too, which was which was I'm glad I was there for those purposes. Anyway, bloody hell, I think I went off track there. Uh, Actually, or maybe it was. Oh no, yeah, it was in regards to the comments on here. Definitely, definite point of stop. There has to be a point of stop. Good point. I'm not an expert, but for neither am I. I'm definitely not either. I'm just sharing some of my responses to the questions that I've received in the reintegration space. I'm not an expert, but former criminals I've spoken to do did change their ways. Said it was selfish desire rather than growing up poor or being abused that fueled their decisions. That's cool, eh? Like when you can come across and speak with individuals that are go to. Oh, I don't know about go to, but um, accept and are just very honest in regards to what drove them or motivated them to do the silly stuff that they were doing, and selfish desire and um, wanting to see if they could get away with it or whatever else it might have been. That's that's a cool place to be in, I think, for that individual who's able to identify that and recognize that and openly share and disclose that. Um, I think there are a lot of people that use some of the trauma, not in all cases, like don't get me wrong, but I think there are a number of people that potentially use some of their past trauma as an excuse to um, do the things that they've done, right or wrong. And I think I shared in one of the other videos, it can be quite convenient to use some of the past trauma or abuse uh, to say, well, that's why I am the way I am, or that's why I do what I do. And I think, legitimately, I think there is a lot of truth to that. Like, some of our past experiences, if not all our past experiences, can have a massive impact on, our view and perspective of the world and how we see things, and flow on to things that we might then end up doing, which we might not want to do. Hence why there's so much emphasis on the family, the home stability, and raising children, as well as you can, to be positive contributors out in the community. It doesn't guarantee anything by any means. You can have people that come from very well-to-do families. They've got loving parents. They're not massively wealthy or anything, but they're not super struggling either. They're just sort of, they're comfortable, and they can, people from all walks of life can still take a drastic turn for the worst. So yeah, there's definitely no guarantees. Like your comment, Stuart. Hypothetical here: how do you believe society would be different if mandatory conscription were in place? What a cool question. I would love if mandatory service conscription was still in place, personally. But again, a lot of that is largely my bias for the military, and the fact that I wanted to join from such a young age. But I do think that it would help so many young people these days, just get a better sense of what they're able to achieve, their self worth, um, and how much better the world, in my opinion, could and would be if that was something that happened. Now, um, I think mandatory service was or may still be a thing in South Africa. I'm not sure. Maybe it's not, but I'm sure it was, or it was for longer than it was in most other places. If it isn't still to this day, and as we know, South Africa sadly has got one of the highest crime rates and stuff over there. I guess a lot of it may be potentially due to poverty, or a lot of it may be just due to selfish desire, as you've mentioned with some of the people that you've spoken to. But from a hypothetical perspective in your question, I'd like to think that the world would be, or society would be, a better place. That would be my hope, and expectation. Could it influence or change the minds of young men who feel their life lacks direction? I 100% think it could. Um, yeah, that's just my take. There are so many opportunities in the military, from trades, from administration, from logistics, from soldiering, frontline combat, stuff, like the list goes on. There's so many opportunities for individuals, young people, or young or older people. But in this case, here, to your question, I assume for younger people, or younger men, younger women, to be able to, yeah, take advantage of those things. So yeah, I think society would be better, and I think it could positively influence and change minds of individuals. Um, no guarantees though. Like, heaven forbid, you know, live fire day out on the range, a person, whether young or old, whether conscripted or not conscripted, goes off the rails. Like, just has a breakdown, has something happened, has received some news that nobody else knows about, which just blinking sends them down a super dark path. And just so happens that there's going to be some high risk work, and using live ammunition with your weapons on a range is some high risk work for that day. And a lot of safety measures and stuff are taking place, and may not always be able to visually tell or see if somebody is in a less than ideal or in a dark place. So yeah, like, there's no guarantees, but I think by and large, like, those are risks that the military accept and take every day, and they try to have things in place to mitigate that as well as they can. So it wouldn't change too much, I don't think, on a day to day. People would still be mindful of, potential risks like that, or situations like that playing out. Just the same way they practice with the grenade throwing drill, and you practice several times, like, if the person has a bloody spaghetti arm and doesn't throw the grenade and it doesn't clear the bay where they are, hence why it's sectioned off in certain areas, and hence why the instructor is right there. That's one of those particular drills on basic training, at least, whereby then you will be physically grabbed and manhandled. If your noodle arm throws a grenade and it doesn't get to where it's supposed to get to, and it puts the the soldier being assessed as well as the instructor in danger. So then physically manhandled and then moved into a safe place. And those drills are rehearsed and rehearsed till the cows come home. But yeah, your hypothetical, I think there'd be more positive than negative. Uh, let's go to here, Lewis. In relation to Stuart's question, have you seen the cases in the US where gangs have US have gone, or where gangs in the US have gone into the military and become better criminals? I haven't seen that. It's why I'm against national service. Okay. Yeah, no, I haven't seen that. What I know from NZ and Australia, which I think is still the case, is anybody with a criminal record um, is automatically cannot ever serve in the military. But yeah, that national service, yeah, because you know gangs are notorious for getting people young, trying to well, they're able to influence these young minds a lot sooner rather than later, and baffle them, bamboozle them with BS and all sorts of stuff, money and whatever else they might choose to do to influence the young minds. Yeah, there's a there's a consideration, with regards to the national service. Um, but yeah, I still think personally, I think the national service or conscription, whatever the term is, um, by and large, would be more of a good thing for the vast majority of the young people that are just, pretty wayward, or those young ones that are wayward and off the off the track at the moment. Try to bring them back on. But yeah, cool to your perspective, and probably from, I'd imagine, from your experiences and what you've seen as well in the law enforcement space. So Stuart, I have not, but would be interested to see any research or books on the topic. Yeah, I definitely haven't seen it either, Lewis, in terms of, yeah, uh, bloody those that are so massively entrenched, and like I said, it can happen from a young age into gangs. Yeah, like I could imagine that it would be easy for them to keep their allegiances to those gangs, and if it was one of those things that they go, "Oh, okay, yeah, you go in here, and then you can, um, be better at tactics and how we might be able to better execute criminal activities, etc." Blah blah blah. Like I could imagine that those that have had such close ties and have been groomed, basically that's what's happening. Like they've been groomed by those gangs to be loyal to them, that they would potentially look to maintain those ties, and may use, there's nothing stopping from potential people from joining the police force and having known ties to gangs, or maybe not as well known, but they manage to keep that stuff hidden and get into the police force, and they gain a better understanding of police response, likely response, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, like that just opens up a whole bloody can of worms, I think, with regards to that. But good points to consider, man. Um, would be more. Was it? I'm more of a believer in police foot patrols or bicycles would be more effective in stopping crime before it happens. Yeah, interesting. I think it would definitely be nice for people in the public to have a larger presence, of law enforcement in their communities, in their areas. Albeit, I'm pretty sure in certain parts here of Aotearoa, New Zealand, we're really struggling at the moment. I would assume it's struggling everywhere, like Australia, probably the US, probably the UK. Um, I assume, yeah, most countries, if not all countries, are probably struggling for law enforcement. Here in NZ, as an example, I know like there's massive gaps in the corrections officer space, like literally hundreds and hundreds of positions, staff, doing long hours, um, and it's shift work as well. and that can take a toll on the individual. So definitely, I think there's a lot of gaps and areas for improvement. Uh, but interesting about that, yeah, definitely. I think a higher police presence, whether that's foot patrols, bicycles, whatever, vehicles, motorbikes, um, would definitely help and go a long way to deterring. What's this? Due to our job, we teach people how to do home invasions. Wow. USMC instructor, he was quite upset that the Bloods gang were using those skills. Oh, I bet that, I bet he would have been upset. Bloody, wow, due to the nature of your job. Is that due to the nature of your job in law enforcement or US Marine Corps? US Marine Corps? Um, Due to our job, we teach people how to do home invasions. Yeah, I can understand why um, you would practice that and or assess that, because how would trying to get an idea how would and get in the mindset of people that are going to look to commit crimes like that. You want to try to get into their head. It's no different from military operations. Where would we be? What would we do? Where might we place XYZ if we were looking to defend this position or this, use this as a stronghold or whatever? I'd imagine law enforcement's going to be pretty similar. And I would imagine law enforcement likely speak with and get an idea where they can of speaking with inmates that have been, maybe successful, if that's the right term, or unsuccessful because they've been caught, but maybe they've done a whole bunch of stuff that could help police um, potentially identify gaps in what they may have been looking for or how they were assessing things, and which may help them do better going forward. So yeah, lots to be learnt, by on both sides. But I could only imagine that it's yeah, upsetting and disappointing if those skills are being used, and they recognise the teaching of those things. What's this? Milo Oreo symbol skulls worn by Hell's Angels comes from Freemasonry. Okay, I have no idea. I know the term Freemasons, but symbol skulls worn by Hell's Angels comes from Freemasonry. E-scooter, e-bike patrol by community workers and police. Yeah, like there's heaps of things, eh? They're just, I just don't think there's heaps of people. I just don't think we have the people power at this stage, or at least not here in NZ in Australia, and we probably don't have the budget either. No surprises, training home invasions because USA trained terrorists, and that is no surprise. Yep, you know, I'm pretty confident there's some a lot of truth to what you're sharing there, and yeah, things that have been going on. I mean, what's it stuff with Timor and Indonesia and East Timorese, and Australia's been involved in going over and training with and training Indonesian forces and special forces, etc. General and special forces over there. So there's uh, I don't know why. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in the training, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there in and around America training terrorists, funding terrorists and stuff as well. Just have a look at the Sean Ryan show and other shows whereby he's got guests talking about the billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to supporting the same people that they're sending troops over to go and fight against. But who am I? Who are we? How do I prove that? How do we prove that? How does Sean Ryan prove that? He's got such a massive platform. I don't even know if he's able to prove it, but he's got guests that are willing to come on his show and talk about that stuff. So, clearly there's a lot of people that know some stuff, but it's either super hard or complex or complicated to try to prove that, or there's a combination of that, and or maybe people are just been bribed and brought off as well. Lewis B, there was a documentary about why they phased out the service instead of sentence scheme. Oh, okay. Where that quote came from because of the results. Right. Thanks for that. Documentary about it, eh? That'd be an interesting watch. Would multi battalion be used for what? Would multi battalion be used for? I'm not sure what the question is. Be used. What's this? Three nuts X3. G'day Joe. Did you serve with Mark Wales? No, he got in after I was out, bro. But I know the guy. I've met him. I don't know him super well, but I met him through one of my other mates that worked closely with him and out on patrols. But yeah, Wells is a good guy. As far as my interactions with him, from what I've seen of him, um, yeah, how he comes across, and yeah, but I didn't serve directly with Mark at the time. Yeah, lots of interesting comments and stuff on here. Thanks for people taking time, which is surprising. I didn't think there'd be anybody on at this time, but anyway, there is. So thank yous. This last question, number 11 of the ones that I've received, again, just in this reintegration space from what's come through. What's that? Just over an hour. Holy heck. How do you hold the line, in quotation marks? How do you hold the line when someone has an incident or breaks the rules? E.g., drinking alcohol, breaching curfew when they're not allowed, doing drugs, or violence and aggression between residents, or attacks on staff or members of the public. Um, well, to the person that sent these 11 questions, you hopefully you've got a bit of an understanding from the other questions that I've answered, and outlining all the the processes and structure that we put in place in regards to assessing and onboarding an individual as those referrals and applications come through. So holding the line was, I found it to be pretty easy, although uh, I may not have, well, not may not have, although I didn't always get it right. Like with that example that I shared about the person that did come back who was drunk and stumbling around and that sort of thing, and I exited him. That was me holding the line. In terms of still maintaining and holding the line after, as I also mentioned in that same video, we did a big review where I acknowledged all the areas where I felt like I went wrong and took on board the feedback from corrections, from the staff, from the residents, from the men that we had in the whare and the iwi. And then we did a collaborative approach to rectifying all of those things. So massive detailed review of the rules and guides that we had to try to be as fair and as reasonable, and but still maintaining practicality, or being as pragmatic as we could with regards to what we were putting in place, so that we weren't diluting and minimizing the safety and well-being of other men, the staff, the community, and so that we could still look to provide the outcomes of which the service has been assessed against, because it was a funded program and still is. So it's still being funded to this day. I think the contract's been extended out to 2030, so which is really good news. So the staff and the team members there have a job at least until then, until another review happens prior to that date, and it also means that the service can keep running and bringing men into the service. Those that want to be there and that earn an opportunity to get there anyway. So yeah, how do you hold the line? Being flexible and adaptable, and being open and honest with the reviews, transparency as and where required. We've spoken a fair bit about that. Obviously, transparency is not shown when individuals, like the men or staff, have personal private things that they need to bring up. So, but where it's things that we agree impact the whare overall and the safety and well-being, etc., and helping the men coming into the service succeed, and the staff being utilized as tools to help the men succeed in their journey, then yeah, then there's a whole bunch of transparency that happens in that, and it worked out really well. From what I understand, I believe a lot of that stuff still happens to this day at the service that's running, and the relationships seem to be going really well, and they're getting some good outcomes with people, graduating and moving on and moving out of that service, getting on with their lives, which opens a space for a new person, another referral to come in to the service. So yeah, when someone has had an incident or breaks the rules, so they've got more things in place now. They may have adapted and improved things even more since I was there. But as I mentioned, I'm glad that it was in a good space when I left anyway, and the team seemed to be cracking on and doing a fantastic job. Excuse me. What's here? So from Milo Aurea, is voluntary territorials versus regular conscription still used if there were a war? I don't know, man. I have no idea. Uh, from what I understand, here in NZ, there is no regular conscription. Um, does the government and the defence, like in conjunction, do they have powers to enforce conscription if something was to happen? I don't know that either. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. That'd be something that people would have to look into. I haven't looked into that. Voluntary territorials, obviously, that's still a thing. People can volunteer to join the TF. But in terms of the rest of your question, versus regular conscription still used, is it? Are those things still used if there were a war? Yeah, I don't know. There would probably be, I would imagine there's probably some type of emergency powers that probably come into play for the government and or maybe the defence force if something was to happen. Um, how they would go about actually enforcing it if people did not want to serve in the defence force or in that type of setting at all. Good luck to them. I don't know, I don't know how they'd go about enforcing that if people don't want to, or if people didn't want to serve in something like that. Stuart, another hypothetical: how far through the 10-day selection for NZSAS and 21-day selection for SASR do you think you'd get with your current fitness levels? Uh, current fitness levels. Well, I've spoken about my running has been cabbage lately, so the run would probably trip me up just because of my left Achilles. So that's day one. So, like right now, if I was to go to the selection, like this is day one of either one of those selections. And I know that one of the first things, if not the first thing, after your parade and your meager breakfast, and then get into PT kit, is going to be running the 2.4 or the 3.2. Yeah, my Achilles is not gonna like it, and that it's gonna like blink and hose me over. So, yeah, that's where I am. I think you and Jamie Pinnell would still pass. Oh, I should have read that first. I think I think from a mental perspective and overall, like the navigation skill set, although maybe a little bit rusty, but actually I don't think it's too bad. I've been out into the training areas where in Waiuru and feel all right, but like from a technical tactical perspective in terms of navigation itself. But yeah, just the Achilles is probably the main one for me in terms of where that at. Mentally, in terms of where I'm at. Sorry, I should say physically. Mentally, feel good. And maybe other physical parts, maybe not too bad, like carrying a pack, like carrying weight. Like I feel um, that's always been something that I've uh, been capable at. Is the word. I wouldn't say good. It's something that I've had an ability or capacity for carrying some weight in my back and being able to move at an okay pace. Jamie's likely, definitely, probably still ripping through um, with through the selection or selections if he chose to do both. But yeah, probably day one and I'd come unstuck. I'd give it everything I had though for that run, but whether or not it would be enough and whether or not my Achilles would hold up on that day one for the run is TBA. Like, jury's out on that one. To be, oh, sorry, TBC. So yeah, that's my response, bro. But thanks for saying that you think I'd still pass. Yeah, Jamie probably likely to still pass and see him for a bit, but it's pretty common for a lot of people, not everyone, but pretty common for a lot of people. And Jamie being one of those people, as far as I can tell, just try and stay as active as you can. Milo, are you regularly psychologically assesses every year, or only as or when needed? Oh yeah, I think I get the question. Good question. Just thinking now. Um, Psychological assessments during that phase. Once for me, it may be different now. When I was in after selection and cycle, I don't recall personally having any other psychological evaluations for me personally. So, and I didn't hear of any of the other guys like on a day to day or showing up for work and getting a brief from our troop sergeant saying, okay, we got psych evaluations today or this week, or, like if that was going to happen, it would have been forecast and we would have been given a heads up so that we know where we're going to be when we rock up to work that day. So for me, didn't receive I didn't have any other psychological, well, not that I knew. Not for, let's put it this way, no formal ones. So I did have conversations with the psych like once I was already in, but they were informal, in passing, in the mess or whatever. But yeah, so hey, maybe those were. Now that I think about it, but no, none formally like the formal ones that I recall during my selection and cycle of training. Last question: referred to SAS psychologically assessed yearly or as and when needed? Yeah, no, I don't even recall having an annual psychological assessment. So, um, yeah, not a formal one anyway. How's this on? Three nuts. Where is the SAS training base in NZ? North or South Island? It's wherever their main base is in the North Island. Um, but they in terms of like training, if they need to do training, like it's not uncommon, they'll go to the South Island to do training. Various parts of the North Island, depends on what it is. But in terms of HQ, like people know the HQ for SASR in Australia is in Perth. People know the or I assumed, but yeah, maybe not. Um, a lot of people know that the headquarters for the New Zealand SAS is in Auckland. So yeah, just like, oh bloody hell, I've forgotten. People have been kind enough to share with me where the headquarters for what's the bloody name for Delta Force and Rangers and stuff, where that is in the US. I've forgotten where it is already. Shows how much attention I was paying to it. Milo, or do you think SAS should have had a regular psychology assessment after each tour of duty? Oh, so yeah, there was, you have a, not a psych review and not a psych assessment, but you do meet with, so we had it even after East Timor, but you do go through a process where you meet with psychs at the end of a deployment. So yeah, sorry, I probably just maybe didn't understand your question if that's what you meant. But yeah, it's not uncommon. There's also part of the, oh bloody hell, I forget the name. I don't think it was called transition, but it was along the lines of, you've been away on this tour of duty or on this deployment. Before you come back home, like typically in a forward operating base, while you're still not back in your country, you'd have meetings with your PC, troop commander, or troop sergeant, troop commander, maybe the SSM, maybe the OC. Not always all of these people. Um, with psychs and stuff that were there. Maybe I suppose the HR equivalent of civilian side of things, and sometimes you'd be handed information, sometimes pamphlets, sometimes general meetings for the large collective, whereby different people would stand up and speak about just things like, okay, you've just been through some of this stuff. Here's some things to be mindful of when you go home, etc. Especially those with spouse, partner, children. Here's some things to be mindful of, which we've learned over time from other experiences, blah, blah, blah. And then there's also an opportunity, or there at least was an opportunity for soldiers, if they wanted to at that time, to go and meet with a psych or a counselor and have a conversation with them if they needed to before going back. Um, in Initially, at least during my time, that stuff wasn't optional. It was like we just had to go. So go along and have a chat, sit down, talk, and then yeah, and then I guess they're making any notes that they felt that they needed to. You're responding to questions essentially that have been asked of you, and they're like a duty of care, health and safety, welfare check of the soldiers that have been deployed before you head back. So um, yeah, that sort of stuff did happen at least. Whether or not it happened every time, whether or not it happened as well as it could have or should have, um, I don't know, because if you've heard Mark Wales talk a bit about in some of his podcast interviews that he's done, he has openly shared about, guys were uh, doing back to back tours, guys weren't getting mandatory time to decompress and relax, guys were only going home for sometimes only a few weeks or a few months at a time before then redeploying again, and sometimes doing longer deployments than just 3 months or 6 months. So that can take a massive toll. I believe that there was and I don't know what it is, but I believe that there was certain sort of ratio, I guess, for want of a better term, in terms of time deployed away versus time that individuals should have off once they get back home. And what I was picking up on as I listened to Wellesley speak was that a lot of exemptions were being approved, were being written up and approved for operators to then, just keep redeploying, redeploying, redeploying without having that appropriate time to decompress. Um, to be honest, I would say all of those guys, probably at least initially, were quite happy with that. That would be my take, because um, from a personal perspective, although I wasn't there with them in Afghanistan, with the lads there, uh, that would have been uh, my mindset. I would have been happy to redeploy and go back, especially the regiment doesn't have a massive amount of numbers, and so when you're rotating in and out of country, and people are on different tasks, and then all people are required because there's still training obligations and responsibilities that need to take place. There's still selection courses to run. Plus, you got this global war on terror, like all of those things take staffing and manpower, etc., etc. Then there's the cycle to run with all the various courses that run over those 12 months to 18 months, just to get a new trooper up to the minimum standard to be able to go in. Like there's a heck of a lot of stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So not uncommon for people to, and people shouldn't be surprised that rotation cycle starts to ramp right up and becomes more frequent than what is planned or designed in theory on paper, which looks all nice and pretty, but in practical application doesn't necessarily work out well. And some of the reasons for that, without going into all the detail, but I mentioned selection and cycle as an example. Your training wing and your staff that you need for not only selection but for all the courses, patrol procedures, CQB, counterterrorism, demolitions, parachuting, etc., list goes on. Um, y- you need the staff for that, and not uh, it's not great to go and then have the pool of training staff there facilitating all of those. So you've got good staff, consistency, got the structure, you know what's happening, you know what they've agreed on and how things are going to flow. And then if a rotation happens, people come back, and then you swap out all of that crew, all of that training staff that to a degree as well have been building a relationship and identifying certain individuals within the cycle, who they are, how they work, um, what their strengths and weaknesses are, areas and opportunities to improve. It's not helpful to pick up all that knowledge and information and then take them out, put them into a deployment, bring back soldiers off a deployment, and then put them into that training wing, who are then, uh, I don't want to say lumped, but then essentially looking at faces that they don't know, that they have not seen in selection, that they don't have the understanding of some of the stuff that I just described earlier, trying to make an assessment of these new faces. Hopefully that makes sense. That's just one example, and hence why some of that stuff, and guys likely had uh, their requests for redeployment and exemptions approved. Is that a good way of doing things? I don't know. Maybe not if you're looking at it. I mean, it's not in essentially, it doesn't sound like it's in line with what the SOP was, which looked pretty, but that, all plans look really nice and pretty until it's time to implement and execute them. And I can only imagine that was one of those um, periods of time where it just wasn't. They weren't able to. They likely would have tried to find solutions and ways around, tried to give a bit more rest to individuals where possible, and then bring in other people where they could potentially. Like there's, just swapping out maybe a couple of people or a handful of people to try to plug in some of those gaps to give people a break. There would have been all sorts of problem solving um, discussions and things being applied to try to come up with a result. But I think ultimately the guys that likely would have had those exemptions approved, I think they probably were quite happy to go as well. Like as long as everything was all right at home and they were feeling, fit, fast, strong, capable, and ready to go, I think they would have had no issues in going over personally. But those, you'd have to ask those sorts of people, like the Mark Donaldsons of the world, like the oh, what's his name? Like some of the other guys that Anthony Gadeen, I think is his name, Gads, uh, Ryan Wilson, Aussie guys like Horse that are prominent on social media and that sort of thing from SASR. There'd be a whole bunch of other guys. Kiwis would be the same. Need to ask them. Two guys would be the same. Need to ask them. But I would assume that if stuff like that was happening for them as well, that they were probably happy to deploy because that's what they joined up for. That's what they volunteered and signed up for. That's my honest take on it, anyway. Um, where are we? Psychology yearly assessed. SAS training based. Do you think SAS should have regular psychological assessments after each tour of duty? Yeah, I think they probably did keep that. I mean, if it was mandatory back in 2001, unless there were some major changes or discussions that happened, I like to think they probably still had those types of conversations. Yeah, it wasn't a psychological assessment like the ones that you have on selection and cycle. It seemed to be, at least my experience, more of a welfare check of the individual and being more aware of, you're going to be hyper alert. You might have an oversensitivity to certain things when you're out in public, trying to give us as much information as we could so that we could start processing that and essentially start trying to decompress before getting on the plane to head home. Things to be thinking about so that if and when things did pop up, may have popped up when you're at home or when you're with your loved ones or whatever, when you're out in public, that you potentially something might trigger and you remember and go, oh, that's all right. I'm at home. I'm not in a war zone anymore. I don't need to react or potentially overreact in terms of how they might have reacted if they were still in country. Hopefully that makes sense. What's this? Do you think I don't read that one? Many service people have a stigma with mental health, psychology therapy, psychology therapy. I would always refer them to Padre because of their fear of psych evaluation slash assessment and being labeled mental disorder. Yeah, there probably still is to this day. Probably are. I think um, if I think back to when one of those things first happened to me, which was Timor, because that was my first deployment, albeit it was more of a peacekeeping one. Um, I didn't want to go and see the psychs. I was like, "Oh, what for? I'm fine." Like that was just my personal thought. I don't know if it was because of any stigma. I just didn't feel like going to see them, but we had to go see them anyway, so we did. Answer the questions, and then when I came out of that, what I discovered was, oh, actually, there was some useful information. So it wasn't a padre; there were a suite of counselors, psychologists, I guess, and we all, cycled through at different times. We got timings and dates of where we needed to be, and so we went and attended and did those things. Got little flyers and pamphlets, and yeah, as I look back, there was actually some useful information on there um, from a family perspective. Things for me to be mindful of, especially as I was, with my married, and we had a young daughter at the time. So I found some of that stuff useful. But yeah, I definitely didn't want to go. Maybe it was because of stigma. Maybe subconsciously or unconsciously it was because I didn't want to have any be labeled with anything. But the reason why I say I don't think it was for me is because um, I knew and we all knew it was mandatory. Like everybody had to go, and everybody did go and sit in the little room and answer the questions put to us by the psych or the counsellors. Milo, hey Dave, kia ora bro, tēnā koe brother. Milo Oreo, how do you feel about stigma against mental disorder, PTSD? Um, I don't know what you mean by stigma against mental disorder. Do you mean people? Do you mean people that are suffering with PTSD, or do you mean people that have a thought or opinion about other people who are suffering with PTSD? I'm not fully sure of the question, bro. Especially in services, police, army, navy, air force, and being male. So, how do you feel about stigma against mental disorder? I don't understand the question properly. Sorry, bro. Uh, so yeah, to my point, Dad, or to my question to you, do you mean so if I had PTSD, how I feel about what other people might think about me, or if I'm looking at somebody else who has PTSD, are you asking in terms of um, what I think about them? Oh, that person over there. Look, oh, don't talk to them. They've got PTSD. I'm not sure what you mean. Um, Three nuts. Did you have to go through customs in Australia after deployment? As I know a few blokes after Timor that had wooden tea chests full of army goodies. That was that was Townsville. What? I don't recall going through customs, bro. What I think happened, and same in Iraq, all our gear from memory, I think had some customs checks done. So like our trunks, our packs, we had to clean all our gear, dust off the boots, bottom of our boots. Like it was pretty detailed. Vehicles, when the vehicles and stuff came back, although a lot of stuff was left there, obviously our weapons, etc. So there was lots of cleaning and um, getting our stuff so that it would meet customs and quarantine expectations and standards. But I don't recall going through customs in Australia, not after Timor or after Iraq. So whether or not that was something that happened after, possibly, but yeah, I don't recall that. Like I've got some little trinkets and stuff from from my deployment. Did I get anything from Timor? I don't think I've got anything from Timor other than just photos. But from Iraq, yeah, a few things, some stuff out of the jets that you've seen or that people might have seen in some of the photos, the wingless jets, I suppose you'd call them, but still didn't stop us from having a look and having a raid in some of those um, places and things to bring some stuff home. But I didn't like not massive stuff. Like some guys bloody got rugs and with Saddam Hussein's face on them and all sorts of other bigger, louder things. Stuff that I got were just like little trinkets, like this little clock timer thing that has a little bit of glow in the dark, um, a scope and a sight from one of those ZSU-4 things. So yeah, I'm just looking there. They're just sitting in the cabinet behind me. So yeah, that was about it for me. Got a few bayonets and things like that. And I've given some of those away, but no, like firearms or anything like that. Not for me anyway. I don't know if any guys may have. Um, maybe there might have been some stuff in the bigger scheme of things that might have come back, which may or may not be displayed at the house or the association. Who knows? There might be some other stuff that people might have brought back, which maybe in their squadron lines. Um, Possibly. But as far as from an individual perspective, I didn't personally grab a heck of a lot of stuff. And your customs question, yeah, what was that? That blokes in Timor that had wooden tea chests full of army goodies. That was Townsville. Crack up. Uh, Milan. Milan. Did you notice any cultural differences between the NZ and Aussie military? Yeah, 100%. Like I've spoken about that at length in other videos. Um, yeah, lots of like ultimately soldiering and stuff and mindset towards certain activities and stuff when it comes to soldiering was pretty similar, but culturally, um, you know, quite different. A Kiwi approach and mentality, and even down to the communication style is was, in my opinion and my experience, was very different to how they communicated in Australia. Like in NZ, yeah, you pull the piss out of each other, like, but typically that was done with people that you knew, or if somebody was just a complete bloody muppet, then yeah, you'd rip into them. But otherwise, you normally didn't give. You normally called your mates and people that you knew. Some weird nicknames that might make people outside of that space sort of look and go, "Did he just call him that?" Whereas in Australia, hello was like bloody almost no filter straight away. Didn't matter if they knew you or not. Like he'd be given a nickname or be cursed out or be called something that you might not have liked, even if that person, didn't know you. Whereas, so that was one little thing that took a little bit of getting used to. I think the mindset and approach to um, certain things like situations or approach to work was a bit different at times as well. I think where I was really fortunate was the fact that I went to Recce platoon at 4 RER. Like those guys were senior soldiers, mature guys, skilled guys, like very competent, and so there was already a level of maturity, not only experience, but level of maturity and competence, professionalism that was there in that particular platoon. And I was fortunate to go there because they were laid back, but when it was time to work, they worked. It was one of those that felt similar to being back at home in terms of, okay, people actually in this mob where I was, they do take some time to, they do respect your space and they do take some time to get to know you first before ripping in. So that was, I think that was a nice sort of segue into the ADF for me. Singleton and all that sort of stuff, like where I spent the first couple of weeks doing frag week and things, which was their IETs or their core training, our equivalent to New Zealand's core training, um, infantry core training. That was, yeah, I mean, you're just one of the plebs there. It didn't matter. So heels together, calling everybody by their rank, um, and just doing as you're told. Uh, at 4 RER, the rifle companies and stuff that I spoke about, that seemed a bit strange to me. Thankfully, I didn't spend any time in the rifle company there, but people that I did know that were there and listening to the conversations and some of that stuff, I was like, oh man, yeah, it's a bit of a culture shock from that perspective. But like I said, going to where I went to at four um, was nice because of the professionalism, maturity, experience that those guys, competence that those guys had. So, yeah, probably the other part which I've spoken about in the past, and it did raise its head, um, probably a couple of times for me whilst with 4, was just there at that time, there was, a heck of a lot of complaining, which I wasn't used to. So, by, soldiers in general, that were there in the ADF, and just it was whinging about everything. And I found myself whinging about their whinging. I started complaining about the amount of complaining that I was hearing because I just bit my tongue for ages listening to. I was like, bloody hell, these people not realize how good they've got it. Like, not that I went there for because the pay was better or anything like that. That was just a blanking bonus as far as I was concerned. It was just a byproduct. It was just a bonus. But just people complaining about the pay, people complaining about the conditions, complaining about their barracks, complaining about the weapons, and complaining about the lack of training or too much training. It's like sometimes you couldn't win, and I just that was that just really got on my nerves because I hadn't come from a space whereby I was exposed to a lot of that. Even in battalion, I didn't hear a lot of whinging or complaining about those types of things. Don't get me wrong, there probably was some. There probably were, and maybe I was one of those that was complaining about pay and all that sort of stuff in NZ. I don't recall complaining about that. I just thought it was awesome to be getting a paycheck every fortnight. But it just really stuck out to me. So whether or not that's a cultural or was a cultural thing, I don't know. But it got on my nerves to the point whereby I vented more than a couple of times with people in my team about just shut up, man. Um, just stop complaining about all this stuff. Like you don't know how good you've got it. Like if you want to complain about all these things that you're talking about, then go join the NZ Army. At that time when I'd gone over, there was a number of people that had switched over from the New Zealand Defence Force to the Australian one. I think by and large, a majority of those that did that was probably predominantly for the lifestyle and or financially. Mine was to get over west with the Australian unit. So yeah, from what was it, the cultural perspective? Yeah, that's probably the main one that got on my nerves. Where are we? Where is it? Did you customs note did that cultural? Yeah, that was the Milan. Milo serviceman talking about PTSD. Oh, is that in regards to your stigma? How do you feel about stigma against mental disorder, PTSD? Servicemen talking about PTSD. You just answered it. Thank you. Oh, okay. Sweet. If I answered it, awesome. Thank you very much. What PT tests do you have to pass every year once you're in the SAS? Just your standard, like your RFL stuff, any swim tests that happen, your pack marching stuff, just the standard military stuff, but there might be a higher requirement in terms of distance or time in which you need to complete it in. So, yeah, depending on what it is, your what do they call it? BET, or maybe it's a CFA they call it now, or CFT, Combat Fitness Test, or bloody hell, there's been that many names. BET, Battle Efficiency Test, CFT, Combat Fitness Test, or Combat Fitness Assessment, CFA. As far as I know, RFL has always been the same required fitness level, which is your 2.4, your run, which is that 2.4 run, your push ups, your pull ups, your sit ups. um, swim test, depending on what that is, 200, 400 meter swim, tread water for a period of time, pack your pack march, whether that's 12 kilometers or 15 kilometers, or I think these days in NZ, I think it's a 4 or 8 kilometer pack march. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, whatever the timing is. I think the 4 kilometer, they've got 32 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong. So again, don't quote me on it. And or then an 8 kilometer, which I assume is you get double the time, 64 minutes, 65 minutes, something like that. Um, and yeah, so as far as PT tests, those are those are the ones from memory that you would need to pass. Similar to like shooting qualifications every year. You've got your CQB shooting qualifications, like your room combat at the different distances, static, turning, and moving, different distances 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 meters. You'd have your marksmanship shooting quals that you need to make sure that you stay current with, out on the marksmanship or sniper range for those. You've got your jumps, number of, and those are usually like, unless you were free fall, if you weren't free fall, then you'd have your basic static line jumps, your roundies that you need to qualify in. Whole bunch of just ongoing qualifying stuff that you'd need to do for courses essentially that you've done. MOE, breaching, explosive manual, um, yeah, jungle patrol procedure stuff. Just you constantly, but I suppose part of that, the training that you do and the exercises that you go on, done in such a way and oftentimes quite complex, and that a lot of those things are combined, i.e., you might be jumping out of an aircraft at night, doing a water jump, inflating the small boat, the Zodiac, getting onto that, coming onto shore, casing that, going and doing a hit on the target, combining all of those things, having snipers in position, having the assaulters, etc., they're needing to extract. So, like, it could be a whole, and then it could be in combination with the Navy, doing that onto a ship or whatever, and conducting the tasks, and then infiltrating, conducting the task, and then extracting and getting out of there. So, hence why I mentioned, some of the complexity around that and combining of those things. And by and large, through a lot of that, you're re-qualifying a lot of those things due to the fact that there's been a heck of a lot of rehearsals before then, so training effectively, meeting the requirements from the any shooting perspective and room combat perspective, and then piecing all of that stuff together and then conducting a various mission or task that might have been put together by your leaders. So yeah, plenty of stuff to requal in, and as they should too. Like it is important. It's not a one and done deal, and it's part of that. It's all part of that daily renewable contract. So yeah, you need to be able to pass and requalify the things that you've signed up for and that you've initially passed the minimum standard to get there in order to be able to stay there. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Um, so flight of the Concords portrayed Australians versus New Zealanders accurately. I know who Flight of the Concords are, but I haven't seen that particular skit. Yeah, send it through if there is a skit. But yeah, those fellas are quite hard case. As are a lot of the bloody Australian comedians as well. What's his name? Baron. Oh bloody, I can't remember his name. But there's some funny bloody Aussie comedians as well that pull the piss out of the Kiwis, and vice versa. Fort Benning, that's it. Georgia is where US Special Forces are, or were at least. That's yeah, that is the name that I've seen in some of the comments from people that have taken the time to watch some of the reactions and stuff. Three Nuts X3. Did you ever cross paths with the guys from the TV show SAS Australia, like Ant Middleton, Billy, Ollie Ollerton? Is that his name? All UK guys. Yeah, nah, I never crossed paths with them personally, physically. Probably, I think one of the only guys who wasn't on that show, I don't think, but he has been on one of those SAS Who Dares Win shows, was Colin McLaughlin, one of the Scottish guys. We worked together in the private sector over in Iraq mostly. um, but he's gone on. He's got some funny stuff out, Colin McLaughlin. It'd be good if he still did some of his little short film skits. But yeah, he's got a good sense of humor. That guy, good dude. But I never crossed paths with those other fellas. Bailey Broughton, hey, much love from Whanganui. Kia ora, bro. Yeah, much love back to you and the crew there in Whanganui. Where are we? I think that's all the comments and stuff that's coming here. I appreciate you guys taking some time. I think there's a hand. Yeah, there's a hand. Like there's 7 people. Well, on here it's showing 7 people um, that have taken time out of your fellas' day so far to join in on this live. It was me yapping on about the reintegration. Actually, I shouldn't say yapping on, like that sounds disrespectful. It was me trying to respond to questions that had come through from a corrections officer asking about some of my experience in the reintegration space. And then also another question from a personal home-based perspective who had a question about reintegration as well. And there's been a number of you that have chimed in with your experience and questions as well during this little live. So thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, could have been doing, you can and could be doing anything else. And you may be multitasking, but you've taken some time here. So thanks very much for that. I think that's it from those that, from what I can see. Hopefully, I got to people's questions and answered them. If I missed any, it's not intentionally. I try to go through them. Milo Oreo, I'm not sure how I answered the PTSD one, but you did say that I answered it, so you're welcome. Thanks for that. Milo, again, very articulate discussion. Thank you. I'll take that. I'm going to take that as a compliment for sure. Definitely don't get many of those. Hey, thank you, Milan. Appreciate you all. Have an awesome day wherever you are. Won't take up any more of your time. I haven't got any more questions here on this space. I've probably yapped on for bloody nearly 2 hours. So have an awesome day wherever you are. Take care, stay awesome, and yeah, just keep turning up. Keep staying in the fight. Put one foot in front of the other, and take one day at a time. Yeah, and until the next video, I'll see you on the next one. Remember, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next one, there's a big mana wave about to come from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all. Take care, peeps. Thank you, Zay. Appreciate your time. Let's get to stop.